Good morning. As folks start to file in here to the room, welcome to the third State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreational Plan webinar. This session will be on funding and economic development, elevating outdoor recreation. Our DCNR presenters today are Gretchen Leslie, Senior Advisor, and Justin Royer, William Penn Fellow. And we are happy to welcome our guest speaker, Patrick Starr of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. I know most of us in the last 8 months have gotten very familiar with Zoom, but I will take a few minutes to go through our Zoom toolbar just in case you need a little orientation here this morning. So you will find your Zoom meeting toolbar at the bottom of your screen. These icons over here will allow you to mute and unmute or stop your video. This participant icon will allow you to see who is in the room with you. And the chat box here will allow you to chat with any of our panelists or with the admin or with each other. If you would like to change from speaker view to gallery view, you can do so by hovering over the upper right-hand side of your screen and just toggling between those two options. And if you have speaker view open, you will see only the person who is currently speaking and the presentation. Finally, we will be handling all questions for today's presentation through the Zoom webinar chat. So go ahead and open your chat box on the side of your screen there. Type all of your questions as you think of them into this chat box, and I will be administrating the questions at the end of the presentation. And reminder, all microphones were muted when you entered, so please do try to keep those on mute throughout the course of the presentation to limit background noise. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Gretchen.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Carol, for that introduction. And welcome all. I can't see you, but hopefully you can see and hear me fine. I'm going to provide you with a brief overview this morning and cover recommendation number 1 of funding and economic development, and then kick it over to Justin and Patrick to finish out the conversation or the presentation. I want to first introduce you a little bit to the Outdoor Recreation Plan. You may be familiar, but it is a 5-year plan to guide outdoor recreation investments and priorities in Pennsylvania. We do this to be eligible for the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund, which has been a phenomenal resource of funding for us. Since 1965, we've actually invested more than $178 million into our communities with playgrounds and parks and trails and open space, every county, every corner of the state. So it is a great way to be able to guide our recreation priorities. The plan outlines a lot of challenges that we are facing in outdoor recreation, but many opportunities and outline strategies for addressing the needs and the trends that we are seeing. We do a lot of research to be able to back up what our recommendations are. So we polled, we interviewed, we had focus groups, we had online surveys. In all, about 12,000 Pennsylvanians had a voice in this plan. So it was developed for Pennsylvanians, but by Pennsylvanians as well. This all was done before the pandemic. And I'll point out our vision to you, which is enjoyable outdoor recreation is welcoming to all and accessible in every Pennsylvania community. Well, this couldn't be more important right now in the situation that we're dealing with, and being able to have access to our outdoor spaces for our mental and physical health is of utmost important in today's world. So we're very pleased with that vision that we had outlined, and that will be guiding our work. So as you probably know, there are 5 priorities of this plan, and funding and economic development is the one you'll be hearing about today. But in addition to funding and economic development, we have health and wellness, sustainable systems, recreation for all, and technology. And each one of those recommendations has, each one of those priorities has 4 recommendations with 20 in all. And then there are 70 action items scattered throughout those recommendations, which really put the meat on the bone to what we're trying to do here. So we encourage you to discover the plan. You're not going to learn everything about funding and economic development or the aspects of the plan today, but there are many ways that you can learn more. First is to go onto DCNR's website, where we do have the plans. You can download the PDF, you can download the executive summary, you can look at the chapters. If you're a visual person, we have a really neat story map overview, which provides video and pictures and gives you a quick snapshot of what the plan is all about. So I encourage you to look at that. And of course, requesting a paper copy. I have one right here, and I always keep it by my fingertips. It's always good if you're constantly looking for information to have it right there at your fingertips. So that's how you request a copy. We are, as part of our education processes plan, we're having webinars, and we've already run through the first 3, and I hope you caught some of that. Today, funding and economic development, and next week we have technology. So please sign up for that if you're interested in that priority. So let's get into the priority of funding and economic development. This is really about, how are we paying for investing in these facilities? How are we elevating outdoor recreation as an making Pennsylvania an outdoor economy? How are we protecting our investments? How are we protecting our existing resources, funding sources? And then how are we finding creative ways to find additional funding sources and really hone in on those pilots of success? So, we've got a lot of assets out there that are fueling the strong outdoor recreation economy. We really have to figure out how are we going to make sure we shore up those investments. Oops, I hit the wrong arrow. So obviously, I don't have to tell most of you that there's a high demand and high need for outdoor recreation facilities, particularly now in the pandemic. We've seen an unprecedented use of our state parks and forests and local trails and local parks across the state, across the country. This picture here on the left is of Kinzua Bridge State Park back a couple of weeks ago. We have hundreds of people that are lining up to get across the skywalk to look at the beautiful fall foliage. That is not a typical picture. It obviously is crowded in the fall, but just magnified so many more times than the number of people are now coming to our facilities. We always understand that the demand and the need is out there. What has also true is that there has been a low priority and a low investment into these facilities. And that is because you think about your local elected leaders, your state officials have a lot to deal with, a lot to think about in terms of investment. So outdoor recreation and the facilities that support outdoor recreation don't always come to top of mind. They don't always come as essential services. We hope that is changing with the pandemic. We hope that more people are now paying attention and understand that these are essential services. So recommendation number 1 really gets to the funding aspect of this funding and economic development priority. So we're looking at how do we protect those investment sources? How do we look for new sources? How do we look at the good models out there and emulate them and make sure that other communities are aware of those successful models and really think about how you move forward with meeting that high demand and elevating outdoor recreation. Pennsylvanians really want to invest into outdoor recreation. And in our survey and polling, we found that 56% of Pennsylvanians agree the state should really increase its permanent source of funding. There are funding sources like the Keystone Fund and Environmental Stewardship Fund for outdoor recreation facilities, but people believe that we should increase that. The same 56% also found that local municipalities should be investing more into those facilities. This chart may be a little hard for you to read, but I'll try to explain it, what the colors mean. So the top bar, which is more of a teal bar, is representing our local parks and recreation providers. Those are the people, in parks and recreation departments or local elected officials. The second bar, the yellow bar, is for a public survey we did online that you could choose to answer it. So it's more of our outdoor enthusiasts who have an interest in this. And then the blue bar represents a statistically valid poll we did in the spring of 2019. So you'll see we asked the question, what is your top funding priority? And you'll see that maintaining existing parks and recreation areas really comes up on top for all three of those audiences. The discrepancy comes in when you talk about the next two, where Pennsylvanians believe that we should acquire and protect open space, we should protect wildlife and fish habitat, yet local providers who are providing those local parks and trails don't place as high a priority on that. We believe, we assume that this is because they think that is the responsibility of agencies like DCNR, the Fish and Boat Commission, the Game Commission, and so we think that that is the interpretation of that data. I would encourage you to go in and look at this chart a little more because it does have some good nuggets of information. So if we have money, what should we build? And here you can see what the priorities are of the different audiences. So our local parks and rec providers think we ought to be investing in our playgrounds, and also investment into community and regional trail systems. Our outdoor enthusiasts place a high emphasis on these community and regional trail systems, and also a strong emphasis on community and regional parks, and tied for that outdoor environmental education and nature facilities. Keep hitting the wrong arrow. Sorry about that. So, what are the creative solutions out there for funding? And that's what this plan hopes to look at, examine, and replicate. Where do you get the money? There are a couple really good examples of where new funding has come into parks and recreation facilities. In 2017, Philadelphia instituted a beverage tax that's pumping $500 million into their park maintenance. In 2019, Pittsburgh had a voter referendum for a property tax increase, which is now infusing $400 million into their parks rehab. So those are big, good examples, which are infusing a big chunk of money into those facilities. But there are smaller examples. For instance, in the Lehigh Valley Green Retail Program is allowing businesses, customers of certain businesses like a bike shop, to round up their purchase. So I have $1.50 I'm spending, I can give the next 50 cents that will go to trail maintenance in that area. Here you see a picture of Kinzua Conservation Shop, which is at Kinzua Bridge State Park with that previous picture. And this is run by the Pennsylvania Wild Center. And so when you make your purchase, you're asked for donations, and those donations collected go locally into the state parks and forests in that region. And in the first 3 months, they acquired through those donations $9,000, which in comparison to 400 million perhaps is not the same, but those dollars go back into the parks, and they can go towards local small projects, so really helping. So this plan, this particular recommendation tries to get into our investments, figuring out new investments and new strategies. And Justin, I'll now turn over Justin, who will take care of the remaining 3 recommendations of this priority. Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Gretchen, and good morning, everybody. Just make sure that this goes through. All right, so moving into, there we go, moving into recommendation 2, to build off what Gretchen was talking about, is really about building strategic coalitions and maximizing the potential of Pennsylvania's outdoor recreation economy. So that looks like, really having a central place within the state where a lot of the work that has been happening thus far has been happening regionally, but having a central location to advocate for the causes of these communities is also important. So the outdoor recreation economy in Pennsylvania is really hidden. And when we talk about industries to drive spending and jobs, outdoor recreation isn't always brought up. But as you can see here, that outdoor recreation brings in over $29 billion in consumer spending throughout the Commonwealth. It supports over 250,000 direct jobs, $8.6 billion in wages and salaries, and that money also goes into local and state economies as well. So you can see how important it is, but what is also notable about the outdoor recreation economy is that it's statewide. So it's not necessarily isolated in one part of the Commonwealth, and it also goes between urban, rural, suburban communities, so it really hits the full gamut. So you'll see in this map, one of the action items in this plan is the creation of an outdoor recreation office. So this map might look a little bit confusing with all the colors here, but the creation of an outdoor recreation office really started out west in, I believe Utah was the first, followed by Colorado. And they can look a little bit different. Some of them are just task forces created by the governor through executive orders, such as in Minnesota and Maryland. Others are staffs of one or staffs of several located in state government. So fortunately, Pennsylvania has gotten on the map as part of the Learning Network here as of last year. And this is really an opportunity for us to elevate the already large economic impact that outdoor recreation has. So right now, that $29 billion and those 250,000 jobs, they put us in 5th place, which is really proportionate to our size as a Commonwealth. But there is opportunity for growth there. Oops. Not getting movement. Next slide. There we go. So recommendation 3 brings us into marketing Pennsylvania as an outdoor recreation destination. And this can, beyond just coordinating the outdoor recreation within the Commonwealth, can make us competitive regionally. So the great thing about Pennsylvania is that it is very, has strong points across all parts of outdoor recreation, whether it's trails, boating, streams and rivers, or hiking. So right now, the tourism office is doing research to figure out what part of Pennsylvania's outdoor recreation economy resonates with the public. So that will really provide a focus on where Pennsylvania can grow and what's going to resonate with the residents in the state and regionally as well. So this next slide, if I can get it to go. Apologies here, my computer is not cooperating. There we go. So our outdoor recreation spaces, as I mentioned, really run a diverse set of assets. So we have over 4.5 million acres of public land to work with. We have the second largest number of miles of streams in Pennsylvania. We have really a strong lands that support hunting and wildlife that resonate with people, as well as a snow and ski economy. So there's a lot of different directions that Pennsylvania can move into. So this is an example of how the tourism office in Pennsylvania is really pushing Pennsylvania as an outdoor recreation destination. And then recommendation 4 is to demonstrate the benefits and impact of nature-based solutions to addressing community needs. And this is important because you're using existing assets to prop up a community. And in a lot of these Pennsylvania communities, you're using, like what you can see here, the history and industrial aspects that were important back, several hundred years ago and still exist here and have gone through quite a bit of ups and downs. So if you see here, you'll see this is actually my own community in the Philadelphia neighborhood of Manayunk, which was previously a very important industrial destination. And has revitalized as of the 1980s to become and sort of to reinvent itself. So if you look here, you'll see the Schuylkill Canal that runs through the neighborhood, and above it is an old rail line that has now been turned into a trail that goes out over the Schuylkill River into Montgomery County that is heavily trafficked. And on the far left of both of these pictures, on the left side of the canal, is the Schuylkill River Trail that runs from Valley Forge to Center City, Philadelphia. So this has many community benefits besides the economic development benefits that have been supporting businesses, but also public health benefits, and it's also heavily used as a commuter trail. So this is another example of a more rural example. The Great Allegheny Passage has a $50 million economy each year and has netted countless businesses from the Cumberland, Maryland to Pittsburgh that it supports. So that's a good transition into Patrick Starr's presentation, where he's going to talk about more about this. So Patrick Starr is an executive vice president of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. He's responsible for integrating PEC's program activities statewide. PEC is a leader of regional scale trail planning and collaborates with dozens of trail sponsors, most notably the Circuit Trails, Metro Philadelphia's trail network. He serves as the Pennsylvania vice chair of the Circuit Trails and helped create the Circuit Trails. He facilitates development of the East Coast Greenways, a Circuit Trail line in partnership with the local municipalities and East Coast Greenway Alliance. Patrick enjoys long distance cycling on roads and trails. He's proud to be a lifelong Pennsylvanian, having grown up near Chambersburg, Franklin County, and the Potomac watershed, and he lives in Center City, Philadelphia. Right? And you're free to go ahead, Patrick. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin, for that introduction. I'm not sure if I've got control here quite yet. I did request remote control.
How is that working?
Justin, I think you have to turn it back to me or turn it over to Patrick.
Sorry, folks.
No, Gretchen's correct. Justin, you will have to relinquish control.
So I relinquish control and
we will get it to work here. All right, I think I may, there.
Okay. I apologize for this, folks.
Well, while we're waiting here, does anybody, if anybody recognizes the virtual background I've selected, which is a successful Pennsylvania Trail Town gateway, maybe you could just put it into the chat box or Q&A. I wanted to highlight a successful community that I visited this past summer. Now, shall I try this again with the request remote control?
So Patrick, please request it from me. I'm running the show right now.
Right, it says that I am, Carol, and it looks like you have given me control. I can see that. You can control. Still not working. Oh man, do you want to just run through the slides for me?
I may have control. I don't know how I do, but I can do that for you, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, we can just, I'm comfortable just asking you to advance the slides. If you want to go back to slide show view, I'm not quite sure where we are right now.
This is the first slide.
Yeah, it looks like what I'm seeing. I think we're not sharing screen right now. I'm going to just try to maybe move along, and hopefully when you get the presentation back up, maybe it's coming right now. I'm going to go to slideshow view and okay. I could try requesting remote control one more time. Do you folks want me to do that?
Sure. Did you try to advance the slide?
I can see that I'm viewing your screen, Leslie, Gretchen. I just sent you the request again. Yeah, it's still not working. All right, folks, how about if we just do it this way? So I think there's been a lot of great information shared, and I wanted to thank Gretchen and Justin for their parts of the presentation. I think that the SCORP is such an important exercise that we go through in Pennsylvania to evaluate where we are and what our vision is for our outdoor recreation in Pennsylvania. I was excited to participate personally as one of the advisors in the process, and really appreciate the enormous effort that the staff put into both the plan itself, the research, and listening to Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth with the surveys and others. Just for your information, PEC really sees the value, Justin, in what you were talking about with the statewide initiatives. We have in the past 18 months or so created something we call the Pennsylvania Outdoor Network, which is an informal coalition of businesses in our state that are, essentially outdoor recreation oriented and think that this is an important thing to pursue in Pennsylvania. We actually hosted an event called State of Play late in 2019. So we're, I think, all in this together. The presentation I'm about to give you on outdoor towns is PEC's attempt to create a resource for towns to really be able to engage in, I would call it self-help, to take full advantage, you could say, to leverage your outdoor or nature-based assets for your town's development. How about we go to the next slide? Here's a simple definition that we've used. Before I launch in, I do want to just give a quick nod to, I would say, our muse for much of this work, a woman named Kathy McCullum, who many of you have heard of. PEC had worked closely with Kathy on several Rivertown initiatives across the state, including on the Schuylkill River here in southeastern Pennsylvania. I also want to thank Trish Carruthers. Many of you may know Trish, who was formerly with the Susquehanna Greenways partnership. We retained Trish to research this site and to help pool case studies together and resources, look at resources from across the country. We looked at a couple of other state programs. And I want to thank my colleague, Lizzie Hessick, who was deeply involved in I'd say, massaging that information and developing the design of this site. It's a very simple concept. Towns that use natural assets to bring people together and revitalize their economies. Next slide, please. And I think you're gonna, right, this is gonna populate. We at PEC like to think that, as a Pennsylvania focused organization, organically a part of Pennsylvania, that we kind of get Pennsylvania at a really important level. The situation that we face is that a lot of our communities developed for historic purposes. And I loved Justin's example of Manayunk, because whether it's a neighborhood in Pittsburgh or in the Mon Valley, was an old industrial community, or whether it's a canal town or a railroad town scattered across the Commonwealth, or a former oil town. You know, we have a lot of great moments in Pennsylvania's history, but sometimes those moments have passed. And it's important to think about, okay, now what, or what next? Next slide. Speaking of which, you know, and here's an example. The before photograph's kind of an odd one, but you know, some of you may recognize this as the main street of Jim Thorpe, which is a town that was down on its luck, to say the least. You know, I first visited it in the early 80s, and it didn't look anything like it now does as a gateway to recreation on the Lehigh River and the Delaware and Lehigh Canal, and with its railroad. Next slide. So, you know, Jim Thorpe is maybe a poster child. We talk a lot of the gap, of course, which Justin again cited briefly, where many towns have also found their future in developing towards that trail. Next slide, please. And here, you know, I'm quoting right out of the SCORP. You know, I took your numbers and put them into my presentation because I intend to give this presentation to towns and other interested parties across the Commonwealth. So yeah, we think these numbers are really important. Next slide. What we see too at PEC, and what we've confirmed through our own work, is that it's important in this moment in particular. You know, again, you pointed that out, Gretchen, at Kinjua, and you know, it's all over. Trails are, and outdoor recreation assets are, you know, more popular than ever. And you know, we documented that with our own report that we assembled back in May, which we're actually updating to try to capture this COVID moment and the impacts of COVID across the Commonwealth. And I think many of us are starting to realize that like these impacts may not be entirely temporary. They may have lasting effect. And we think that one of those lasting effects, a lot of people bought a lot of bicycles, a lot of people bought a lot of kayaks, a lot of people invested in their outdoor capabilities, if you will. So we think this is the start of, not the end of, a trend or a significant uptick in a trend. Next slide, please. What I think is really important to realize, however, about this whole effort, which you know really is important to me personally. My dad was a small businessman. I think a lot of what we're talking about here is small businesses. It's about building wealth in your community. It's about building local or creating local jobs. That's one of the things that's so great about outdoor recreation-based economic development, because it's really place-based, just like many of the towns that have developed across our Commonwealth because there was a railroad junction or there was a canal stop. This is the same kind of economic benefit that's based on your assets where they are. And the businesses can be relatively small, and they can be locally owned, and you know, therefore truly build the wealth of existing residents if done properly. Next slide, please. So, you know, one of the things I took right off of our website is the realization that, you know, your town may, you know, it's like something has happened that you need to really decide to change your direction. I love this quote about realizing that, I'm sorry. I mean, here's a perfect example of this. Pardon me, I got ahead of myself in my own thinking. Here's a perfect example of this in Dilltown on the Ghost Town Trail, of a small business that has developed very organically in relationship to the trail. Next slide, please. And this is where I was about to go. There's a moment that you realize as a town that you may have to pivot for your future. Pivot seems to be a word here in 2020. Everybody had to pivot because of the pandemic, so I threw it in. Next slide, please. Pivoting, though, is not so much about changing your products, thinking of your town as the product. it's more about changing how you promote and leverage your town's assets. Next slide, please. And this is really where our website, our Outdoor Towns 7 steps, which I'll get into shortly, really come in to help you think about how you change everything that you're doing in your town to develop a different customer segment. I mean, think about those visitors as a business, as a customer segment. How do you change your activities? How do you change the things that you have done in the town to make your town more attractive to that customer segment that you seek? Next slide, please. Just one moment for a second. Thank you. I liked this quote, which I started to jump the gun on earlier, from our website, from the community of New Bethlehem, which is out in Western Pennsylvania. That basically, when we saw the tracks were being lifted up, we basically realized, okay, we need to pivot now. The trains aren't going to be coming back anytime soon. Next slide, please. So the kinds of things that you're going to be looking at are not hard to figure out. They're right there in front of you. Do you have a decent pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure? What's your access to those outdoor resources? Is it a park or a river? Is there good access? How do you work with your businesses to help them be ready for the new customers? And of course, how do you do tourism marketing and promotion? Next step, next slide, please. So that's where the Outdoor Town Toolkit comes in. Here's the website. It is a web resource. I think I might have said this. It's really meant to be a self-help guide. We like to think it builds upon the successes that we already know about in Pennsylvania, and PECs and other organizations experience, such as the Progress Fund, which has a nationally recognized program on the gap. Next slide, please. So this is kind of pretty basic stuff, honestly, but we've tried to lay it out for you in a way that makes it easy to walk through and to give you everything you need to make this a success for yourself. Pretty much number one is organizing at a basic level what we call an action team. Next slide, please. So, the action team should be a small group. I always say, 2 people is a minimum for a committee. So it's not just you all by your lonesome. You might be considered a crank or a crazy, but if you get a couple of friends to work with you, now you're a committee and you have some legitimacy. So I think it starts out typically pretty small. And we actually give a lot of tools on the website just to think about who those other people might be, and here are some typologies. It's like, maybe you want to have somebody who knows something about events. Maybe you want to have somebody who's just a really good connector, somebody who knows everybody in the community. Maybe you want to have somebody who's really good at taking great notes and doing correspondence and follow-up, because maybe you're not that detailed person. So, think about the types of skills that might be helpful in this startup phase. Next slide, please. And once you've formed a core group, we would recommend that you think hard then about who are the partners and the resources that you might want to engage at a less, they're not going to be as deeply involved, but you need them on board to be successful. Next slide, please. And these are not hard. Again, many of you know already about your local chamber of commerce, about your area tourism office, the county planning commission. Maybe there's a town or borough or city planning commission. You're going to want to reach out to these folks. You're going to want to take a minute and think with your core group of who are all these people. And again, we give you a whole list of stakeholders to consider. Next slide, please. And you're going to want to bring them together. Next slide. And here's an example of at least a fun way to do that, maybe around beers at an existing brew pub if you've got one. But on our website, we have materials about what are the benefits of being an outdoor town. We basically give you everything you need to inform these other folks about why this is an important pivot for your community to make. Show them the score. We've got sample surveys, ask their opinion, try to bring them along on this learning curve is what you want to do. You don't want to assume that they know and agree with you. People may have been investing for years, even decades, in other economic development strategies. They may not be in the same place that you are, recognizing that this pivot to your outdoor resources is the next best thing for your community and your pathway to success. Next slide, please. So part of making that real is what we call a community assessment. Next slide, please. This is a pretty hands-on thing. So you've had at this point at least one significant meeting of all the partners with the action team. But we would say what you want to be doing is getting people out into the town and having people actually go look at the assets as well as your community's connections and resources to those assets. We've developed a self-assessment booklet, which we know is a good tool. We looked at a bunch of others and pulled some of the best elements together in the one that we created, and it's linked on the website. Be honest, you have to be self-critical, but also be aware that you're just getting started. I think that this is a point at which a professional could be of use. I think sometimes it's helpful to have somebody from out of town. An expert is somebody from 50 miles away, somebody who comes in and can look at your town with different eyes than your own. They might see positives that you don't see, and they may see negatives again that you're just blind to because you have lived there your whole life or for many years. Next slide, please. So after you've done that assessment of what you have and what you don't have, it's time to really decide, do we want to invest in this? I mean, I really believe that at that step 3, you could, with your partners, make a decision that this is wrong for your town. This is not going to work for a whole lot of different reasons. You'll know. But the next thing to do then is, okay, how are we going to address the various deficiencies and how are we going to pursue this pivot? Next slide, please. So one of the things I want to say about planning is I have a lot of friends who are planners. I'm not officially a planner. I don't have a planning degree. Planning drives a lot of people completely nuts, bonkers, or boredom. So one of the things that I think Peck has learned in our work, which is very applied in places, is it's helpful when doing planning to also identify quick and easy action steps. And there are a lot of obvious things here, and I've thrown a few of them onto this slide. I mean, if you're trying to attract people from a trail where there are people biking, do you have bike racks in your town? And does the local diner or the local, or on the main street, even have any place for people to lock up their bikes? Pretty basic stuff. Are there signs to get people from the trail of the town and vice versa? Having ridden the Gap, I know that these things were definitely thought about in many of the communities I passed through. But then there are longer term strategic or actions that you might take towards your strategic goals, such as applying for grants, to assess better your pedestrian connections, or identifying that, like, we really should have a bike lane that gets people from downtown out to the trail. And I think of Franklin, Pennsylvania, again, where I actually rode across a bridge on a sidewalk that is intended for users of the trail. Next slide, please. And then that takes you, of course, to implementation. Next slide. But as I've already mentioned, don't wait to start implementing until you've got the bow so tied onto your perfect little plan. Better to start early with successes, and even better yet, to have parties and celebrate those successes. Next slide, please. And of course, I said celebrate, and here you have it. Make it fun. You know, people need to feel good about stuff, and I urge you to, as you move through the process, to share the success. Give people credit who had nothing to do with your success, but make them feel good, whether that's volunteers, especially your elected officials, local businesses. And as you become more organized and coordinated, festivals, you know, formal ribbon cuttings or groundbreakings, runs, 5K runs, all those things are part of your success and celebration, as much as they are also education and outreach to the community. Next slide, please. It's important to do something that, you know, we all hate to do, which is evaluate, track, and then regroup. I mean, I think that every committee gets tired, so it's important to actually step back every now and again as the action team in particular, and to ask yourself, you know, how are you doing? You know, are you actually being successful? Hopefully you put somebody on your action team who really enjoys collecting the photos, keeping minutes, I'll say, keeping all of the, you know, documenting all the things that have happened. And if you did your survey early on in the process, maybe you do a follow-up survey to check on how people's attitudes and perceptions about what's going on have changed. Keep optimistic and remember that these things don't happen overnight. Next slide, please. That's really the end of my presentation. It was my intention to keep it hopefully pretty simple. And all of pretty much what I've done, you know, is right there on our website. Some of you may have already gone to the website, I don't know. And I don't know whether anybody guessed, but my background is Liberty Street in Franklin, Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to give a nod to that community. When I took the photograph you're seeing behind me in this image, I was sitting at a table at Trails and Ales and celebrating my own ride on the trail that day down to Emlenton and back. Thank you. And that's it for now. Questions?
So we have had a few questions come in during the course of the presentation. I will be starting with one that I believe is for the DCNR folks. Did you find any differences in investment priorities by demographic in your survey?
That's a good question. I might ask Diane if she recalls anything. Nothing is coming to mind, but Diane paid much closer attention to some of that data than I did. Diane, do you recall any demographic? We did collect demographics on some folks.
So the details of all of our studies are on our outdoor recreation plan website. And that particular question was asked by a Lion poll that I believe we did in the spring of 2019. And so they did look at crosstabs. They looked at whether there were any variables by geography or variables by race, ethnicity, and there are some. So I while we're doing this, I can give you a link. I can look and check. There's some differences of opinions from the regions of Pennsylvania, but the number one, I believe the top answers are the top answers, regardless of any of those variables. But we can check that, and while the questions are going on, and I can put the answer in the chat box.
Thank you, Diane. Quick question for Patrick. Is there a designation or is this a process? And I assume they're referring to trail towns.
Outdoor towns.
Outdoor towns. Oh, I'm so sorry, Patrick. Yes, you're right.
You know, I failed to mention, I had it in my notes. Simple answer is no, it's not a designation. You know, we have a a state, we have at least a proto, I'm going to call it a proto state designation program that is actually being developed by the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, nature-based placemaking. Pardon me. I like to think of our effort as sort of like Outdoor Towns 101. It's like getting started at the lower level. I would suggest that maybe if you become a successful outdoor towns, you might be able to get some kind of certification or designation. But we're at the sort of we're going for the the startup of the process, getting it going, trying to get those early successes.
Great. Another question for you, Patrick. How is PEC doing public input with COVID? How are you keeping it fun virtually when we can't have in-person runs and events as much?
Well, my colleague Frank and some others pulled off a public lands ride that was essentially a virtual event. People registered and signed up and shared images and photos of what of their riding all across a set of designated areas that we suggested. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely doing what we can to support those sorts of activities. It's challenging. I mean, it was that pivot again. We had to suddenly take things that would have been in person and go virtual. So I think we've had some success with that.
Great, thank you. That looks like the end of the questions that I see. Oh, one just came in. Are the municipalities you are working with listed on the website?
Do you think that's to me?
I do believe so, yes.
So the short answer is no, because we're not officially working with any municipalities. Let me explain again, and this is meant to be a self-help tool. There is a little pilot. I don't like to steal DCNR's thunder, but in northeastern Pennsylvania, as part of the Poconos, conservation landscape, there's I think a pilot initiative to work with a couple of communities there, Carbondale and Forest City, where DCNR is providing some peer funding. It's an experiment to see whether the injection of a limited amount of professional support can help those communities move further, faster. And there are people on here who can speak to that, including Diane Krippus, who are involved with that effort. I think I saw my colleague Janet may have been on here as an attendee, and maybe Christine Dettore, her avatar.
So I have a little bit more clarification on that question. You had mentioned giving presentations. So are there specific municipalities that you've already given these presentations to, or is that a plan going?
It's more intended in the future. I see that's coming from Jean Ortiz. And so Jean, what I would say is, PEC has this role where we convene a number of, I'll say, networks. So in the Northeast, it's the Northeast PA Trails Forum. In the Western third of the state, it's the Industrial Heritage Coalition. In the Southeast, it's Circuit Trails. We also coordinate the Pennsylvania Water Trail Program. So what we're thinking is that communities that are already involved in one or another of these sorts of PEC coordinated efforts will express their interest, and we're getting that. Like, that's where Carbondale and Forest City came from. I mean, communities that we have a level of involvement with because they are on a trail that we're already working with, but they want to take advantage of that. And so this web resource and our staff time can be brought to bear to make that happen. So it's just really ramping up. We only launched the website, frankly, just around the beginning of 2020, and then we all know what happened right after that. So I'd say that we're going slow on getting this out there, but slow and steady.
Great. Well, seeing no other questions come in at this point, I will go ahead and begin the process here of wrapping up for the day. Thank you so much to all of our speakers that were able to join us today. And we hope that you all will be able to join us back next week for the technology session. And hopefully we can get our technology working a little bit better for technology next week. Fingers crossed. Thank you guys for your patience with us as we work through the issues today. And enjoy the rest of your day.
I hope it wasn't too disturbing. Yeah, thanks, Carol.
No problem. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you all.